Hi, this is Kevin Trainer. Welcome to my tutorial video on the first part of logical database design, which is converting attributes into columns. You'll see that I have up my a diagram that shows us the whole process for logical database design. Refining the conceptual data model is a task that I talked about in the intro video. So now we've come to the first part, convert attributes into columns. And that's got three subparts. Give each column a data type, then convert identifiers into primary keys, and then finally, add further columns necessary to support functionality of the application. Okay, and the functionality of the application is something that we talked about in the introduction video as well. So you could get more information about functionality expectations by reviewing that. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to begin to work with our diagrammer. This tool that we're using today is Microsoft Visio 2013. And the reason I'm using it is most of my students have access to this product for free through Microsoft's educational program. So what I've done is I have taken a copy of the data model that came out of the conceptual data modeling, and I've opened it up, and I'll warn you ahead of time, I've broken it a little bit since the last time that it's been seen. I took a couple of attributes away. I added a couple of attributes. In one case, I got rid of one of the entity types because I want this process of logical database design to have all the challenges that we might find. So here's the first part, which is give each column a data type. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, let's just go to a very simple, entity type. Okay, so what's happening here? Well, we're moving from being a conceptual data model in which these boxes, these rectangles, represent entity types, to a logical database design for a relational database where these rectangles represents relational database tables. And so if we had an entity named student, now we're going to have a table named student. And as we can see, it has two attributes, student ID and student name. And what we want to do is we want to pick a column type. So how could we do that? Well, let's right click on student ID. All right. And that's not going to do it. It's always something I'm not trying. So let's highlight the whole box, right click, and then right at the top of the selections, show attribute types. There it is. Okay. So what are the possible attribute types? Well, the ones that we are interested in here are the integer type, which according to this diagram is called int, and that is one of the abbreviations that's pretty standard in relational database products. And then we have student name. And student name here is going to be some kind of a character string. And in relational databases, there, at least the SQL-based ones, we can have a character field where we say that it has a character type, and then we can pick its fixed length, or it can be a variable length character a string in which we say it's varchar, or as most people say, varchar, and we pick its maximum length. Okay, so we don't have to choose int, that's fine. And student name, though, let's make it a variable length character string. Okay, and let's think about this a little more. Do we want to just have student name as one field? Okay, we generally want to improve the model as we're going along. Or might we want to have their first name and their last name and their middle initial? I'm thinking we might want the latter. So let's do this. Let's highlight the student name field, right-click, insert attribute after, and then right-click on that one, insert attribute after. Okay, so we have student name. So let's just call this first name. And let's call the next one, double click on that to get it to go, middle initial. And let's call the last one last name. Okay. And then let's, in terms of the type, it's a little bit hard to get the type to work. So you have to go over to that column, click on it. I click on it once. Now I'm just highlighting the whole line. Click on it again, and now you see a gray box appear. And when you have that gray box around it, you can type. So I'm going to say varchar, and let's say in this case, well, you know what? Do I have, it would be good to say what the maximum length was. So first name, varchar 25. And it's not looking like I'd like it. Well, that's not so bad. Varchar 25. No, I'm not really liking that. So varchar 25. I don't really like that. So click on that one again. First name. Right click on the right side. Oh, isn't this nice? It's not working. My, is it good? So we're going to back up with Control Z. And now I'm going to type over that again. Varchar 25. That's still going to happen there. So we're just going to say varchar here. This diagrammer is not really going to allow us to do everything we want. And the same thing for middle init. Let's just say that one is character 1. Okay. And let's say the last one there it is varchar as well. So we're not going to capture the maximum here because they just don't seem to be fitting into the template all that well. Now we're going to click off, and we can say that we've chosen the column types of all of the columns. Now, before we were calling them attributes, and I'll call them attribute from time to time, but now they are more appropriately called columns because this is more appropriately a table. So let's go find another one. Let's find one that's a little bit harder. Okay. Okay. Let's do class meeting. Okay. So let's see what we've got. Class meeting. Right now we have a primary key that's a little bit messed up, but that's okay. So let's not work on that one. I want to fix that one all by itself. Well, let's do course offering. How's that? So what are we going to do? Most of these IDs can be just integer values. Okay? So what are the types again? Integer, character string, decimal numbers, which we usually want to use for dollars and cents. Floating point numbers, which I don't recommend for business or administrative applications. I'd rather use the decimal. Boolean, true or false. Okay. So right now we have this thing here. So let's start at the top. Okay, so the semester ID is the typical key for me. Oh, I'm sorry, we have to turn the attributes on again. So that's an int. The course number, I think they're always going to be numbers. That can be an int. Although exactly how long of an int we don't absolutely know. So let's not have the course number be an int. Let's have the course number be a varchar. Okay, so they're going to be numbers, but we're going to be able to control the length. Section ID, in the particular place where this is going to be used, section ID would do well to be a varchar as well, although they're typically numbers. Semester name. Well, the semester name, right now that looks like it would be the year in spring, fall, or summer. Later on, I'm going to tell you that this is in the wrong spot. Okay? But for right now, let's just give it a type. We're going to fix one thing at a time. So, varchar, fine. Course name. Well, that's another varchar. Or as other people say, varchar. But then you have to say it's a character. Course location. I'm thinking of that being a building and room. Okay, that would be a varchar. And days and times, I'm thinking of that to be Monday, Wednesday, 9:30 to 11:15. That would be more appropriately a varchar. Okay? So we've done that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause, and I'm going to do that for all the rest of the tables so that you don't have the luxury or the privilege of being able to watch me do all of these. And when I'm at the end, I'll be right back. Okay, now we're back. So from the course offering, I just want to show you a couple other data types that I used. So let's go down and let's look at the class meeting. The class meeting, the identifier and what's going to become the primary key for this is currently just meeting date. That's going to need some work. But then, so that's a date type. And then the other things, the class meeting password, the instructor name, the course name, that's all varchar. Okay? And then something I did in system user, which is interesting. I've got the user ID, which is a varchar. the email address, which is a varchar, the password, which is a varchar. And then I've got all these permissions, okay? Is this user allowed to play system administrator, Boolean, true or false? And then I've got roles, different roles that they would play. I guess they would be associated with the names of the use cases, okay? So we might have 5 or 6 or 8 or 9 of those, but I'm just showing them as a repeating column, role 1, role 2, role 3. And you may remember from the overview that we're going to get rid of repeating columns and the tables. So these are just a placeholder till we come up with a more relational, elegant solution. Okay, so those are all the data types that we have. Okay? So the next thing that we have is that we want to convert our identifiers into primary keys. Okay, so for instance, here in system user, because of the fact that we're using the Visio diagrammer, and because of the fact that the Visio diagrammer is not very kind to conceptual data models, the way that we were in the last of our tutorials, the way that we were saying that something was an identifier in the conceptual data model is we simply marked it as a primary key. Okay, well, if we were using a better conceptual data modeler, that wouldn't be true. Typically, those the attributes that were part of the identifier would be underlined. Well, here we're a step ahead. So we're already showing primary key. And how do we do that? Well, we highlight the line for that column and we right click and we can say set primary key. Now, if we click it again, the primary key indicator will go off. And then if we come back, we come back and we click set primary key, then it turns the indicator on. We typically always put the primary key up above the dotted line, okay? And if we had a second field, well, let's find something that has a second column that's part of the primary key, do we? Yes. If we had a more complex primary key, here we've got 3 columns that make up the primary key. And although there's nothing to force you to put them there, that's where they should go if you're using the Visio diagrammer. Okay, so that's part 2, convert identifiers to the primary keys. Then the third thing is add further columns necessary to support functionality. Here's where you really start to think about, do I have all the columns I need? And one of the things that I mentioned earlier that we could take a look at now were the roles that I had for the system user. Okay, so let's say the first one, let's say we're going to call it is student. Okay, we know whether they're a student or an instructor. Oh, well, can they play student? That's true. We have to know if they're allowed to play the student role. So let's just call it student role. And then we might say, okay. I don't know why we can't. There it is. Instructor role. And then, no, let's not do that. Sorry, this is going to overlap with something. But let's just say that it's okay that they run use case 1. Okay. And then the second one, use case 2. And the third role, use case 3. Okay, so then we know what their permissions are. So we're getting that to be a little bit better. Let's go up and take a look at class meeting. We don't really have enough here. The class meeting happens on a particular date, but it's a particular date for a particular class or course offering. So if we look at the course offering, what's the key of that? Well, there's a semester ID, a course number, and a section ID. So each class meeting, if you really want to identify it, it needs to include those key fields as well. This is what some data modelers will call a weak entity. It's a weak entity because it doesn't have its own key. To really form its key, you need to include the key of another one of the entities or tables. So this is a classic weak entity. Okay. And so we're going to add the 3 keys, semester ID, course number, section ID, up here. So how are we going to do that? Well, let's insert primary key before. And do it again, insert primary key before. And do it again, insert primary key before. Okay. And again, semester ID, course number, section ID. Okay. So semester ID, course number, section ID. Okay, that's good. And these have all been called primary keys because we put them up in the key area. Okay, so by adding a field up here above the dotted line, they automatically got marked as primary keys. So this is the kind of stuff we want to do. We want to go around the model and say, do I have all the columns I need to get the job done? Now, could we have done this analysis earlier? Sure, we could have. We could have done it back in conceptual data modeling. Some people, including me, like to identify all the attributes in the conceptual data model. So you might have already done a pretty good job of this. But some people don't really do a lot of attribute identification in the conceptual data model, in which case, when you're doing the logical database design, you are identifying lots of new columns that you want to add. So here we have finished our work on the second task in logical database design, convert attributes into columns, because we gave each column a data type. We converted identifiers into primary keys. It's pretty much already done for us by our diagrammer. And then we added further columns necessary to support functionality. And so we've checked off that. Next, it's off to normalization. Bye for now.